So the question becomes, how did the body get out of the coffin, and how did that happen? When you start looking at this, the conclusion, you have to figure out how the body got out of the coffin, and you have to start at Bethesda Naval Hospital and back time it, and you have to go back and treat it like a movie running in reverse. And if the body was not in the coffin at the front of Bethesda Naval Hospital, then it wasn't in the coffin when the plane took off from Dallas, because there's nothing in between. The body was placed in the coffin at Parkland Hospital. It was in the coffin on Air Force One, and then the plane took off. So what happened? Now, I used to believe that the body was taken out of the coffin before takeoff, and I put that in my book, that was the only possibility I could think of. But after my book was published, Godfrey McHugh, the Air Force aide, said, he insisted he was with the coffin all the time. And I said, no, he couldn't have been, because the body wasn't in the coffin. And he had been running around in the plane wanting to know why they weren't taking off and what is this business about a delay for swearing in. Well, this went on for some time, trying to figure out what happened. And I couldn't understand it. And 2 years later, I realized there was another time when the Kennedy party wasn't with the coffin. And that other time was when the coffin went up onto the plane and the Kennedy party was still down on the tarmac. And you see them here, and there's Roy Kellerman, and he's carrying the coffin up onto the plane. So that's when they're down on the tarmac, and he's bringing the body up on the plane. And then Mrs. Kennedy goes up on the plane. There's a few minutes in there before she gets up into the fuselage. That's the only time the body could have been taken off the plane. And I'm just telling you that an empty casket at the Bethesda front entrance means an empty casket on takeoff from Dallas. And when we revisit the events, we find out that the only time, as I told you, was that period. And I'm just going to go back here. And what that means is that in the minutes before she gets on the plane, Kellerman and the other agents got the body out of the coffin and took it off the starboard side of the plane. Now, in final charade, I'll be presenting the evidence that there was a forklift truck on the starboard side of the plane, and the body was taken off the starboard side of the plane and put in the forward luggage area. And there was a photographer taking pictures. His name was Jimmy Darnell. He was on the roof of one of the cargo buildings, and he filmed this whole thing, but he didn't know what he's filming. He doesn't know what his telephoto lens has. And as immediately as he climbs down from his ledge, he's accosted by the Deputy Police Chief of Dallas, Fisher, who demands his film and camera and tells him that what he has photographed is, quote, sacrilegious. That's what he said. The rest of this story I'm going to tell you about quickly as I can, because I wanted to say more in the breakout room, but I want to tell you about what happened. There's a forklift truck was used on the starboard side. I have a witness to the forklift truck, the pilot of Air Force Two, who's now passed on. About the forklift truck, the body was removed from the plane, put in the forward luggage area. The photographer, Jimmy Darnell, I've told you about his experience. How do I know it's in the front of the plane? How do I know these kinds of things went on? Because there's a blood trail. The most important, and I'm going to talk about this blood trail, of course, in final charade, but I'm going to sum it up for you right now. First of all, there was a blood trail on board Air Force One. Kellerman, who had been at the top of the ramp with the coffin during the flight back, was in the jump seat. His shirt was stained in blood from the neck down. Dr. Berkeley had blood on his sleeves. That was reported in the New York Times that weekend. Dr. Berkeley wrote a report the next week to explain this, which I have the report, and the report said that the reason he had blood on his sleeves was that at Parkland Hospital, he reached into a garbage can to get a rose as a souvenir for Mrs. Kennedy. That's the blood trail for Dr. Berkeley. Then there's a problem with LBJ in the bathroom. LBJ, first of all, was the back of the plane when the coffin came on board. I know that now from Air Force records and Air Force witnesses who were interviewed by an associate of mine named Sean Feder, who made it his project, and we can talk about that in the breakout room. Okay. So LBJ ended up in the bathroom on Air Force One. Godfrey McHugh was looking for, where is LBJ in the airplane? They found him in the bathroom, and with Kenny O'Donnell, and McHugh found him in the bathroom, and LBJ was screaming at them, get out of here, close the door. The Secret Service told me to hide in here. There's a worldwide conspiracy. And when LBJ emerged from the bathroom, he had changed his shirt. To which I responded, maybe the Secret Service told him, you know, there's a worldwide conspiracy. Now, we want you to go into the bathroom and change your shirt. Now, there's another problem. In the galley area, there was blood in the galley area, I believe, and there was a problem with that. And that problem was solved between 2:18 when the body went aboard and 2:38 of the swearing in. What they did is LBJ and his buddy, Congressman Thomas, said, we want vegetable soup. This is before the swearing in. So they started opening cans of vegetable soup in the galley. And that is the way that the blood problem was solved, and we can talk about that more later. I want to tell you something. If this was a corporate jet going from city A to city B, you'd arrest these people. You wouldn't let somebody become president of the United States. You find out what the heck happened to the body when it went on Air Force One, and how come it went off the starboard side, and what was it doing in the forward luggage area? Because, how do I know it's there? Because there's blood there too, and there was a cleanup that went on at Andrews Air Force Base that night for about 7 hours. Now, you'll be reading about that in the final charade. And that's evidence. Now, let me tell you about the condition of the body when the president's body reached Bethesda Naval Hospital, and you will not read about this in the Warren Report. It was stained in blood. It was an absolute mess. It was a bloody mess. One arm was raised, as in a, quote, Heil Hitler salute, said this senior Army officer who told me about it. None of this is in the autopsy report. The doctor called for a Tide and a scrub brush and a pail of water, and they scrubbed the body to make it acceptable for the autopsy. That's what they did. And I don't know if I have it here, but I brought my own thing of Tide to show you that they had to do that to the body to make the body cleaned up for the autopsy. Then the doctor had to get up on the table and force the arm down. That's what he had to do. And he did that by putting his knee in the armpit and forcing the arm down. That is not in the autopsy report. The doctor was then told by the senior military official, Edward Kenny, and a rear admiral, you are to determine the cause of death. Now, on a timeline, there's everything that's ante-mortem, that's when you're alive, and then there's post-mortem, and in between, at that dividing line is the time of death. The doctor was ordered to restrict his examination to the cause of death and not to what happened to the body after death. That's in effect what happened. What I'm here to tell you is that this autopsy is a fraud. This means that the connection between Oswald's rifle and Kennedy's death is based on fraudulent evidence. The problem in dealing with all this is logical, not logical, but psychological, because this is a body-centric plot, and it's hard to believe. By body-centric, I mean the whole thing is focused on the body from the get-go. I would like to compare my terminology to what happened in astronomy, where originally there was the geocentric view of the universe, but then it was heliocentric. Geocentric is the Earth as the center, heliocentric is the sun. JFK was viewed by the plotters who took his life in two contexts. He was not just a person to be killed, but also a target to be altered. And that is why this is the President Kennedy we know, and this is the President Kennedy they viewed him as a target to be altered. If you alter the body, you can change the story of how he died, and that is the connection between the illegitimate evidence and the false narrative in this case, and that's the way Lyndon Johnson became president. It's a story fabricated to facilitate the operation of the line of succession of the United States government. That's the relationship between bogus evidence and a false story of the shooting. This case